I've been reading this book titled The New Monasticism by Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove. It's about groups of younger Christians, and they're living in intentional community and seeking to live out how the early church lived in the beginning of the book of Acts. But Wilson Hartgrove tells this story about a woman named Ann Atwater, and she's a friend of his. And he says that Ann was the most militant black civil rights movement leader in Durham, North Carolina. He said, she told me that I hollered till they listened, and if they didn't listen, I'd burn their houses down. So she has a little bit of an edge to her, this woman. But he says that everything changes. Everything changed for her when they started integrating the schools in North Carolina. And the authorities chose a task force to help organize this integration. And they needed 2 co-chairs, and so they asked Ann Atwater to be one of the co-chairs. And they asked a man named C.P. Ellis to be the other co-chair. And C.P. Ellis just happened to be the local leader of the Ku Klux Klan. Isn't that crazy? So these 2 people, these 2 enemies are there together, the leaders of this task force. And they don't want to serve together, but the authorities, let's say they make them an offer they can't refuse. So there they are. And they figure out how to work together. And then some really amazing things start happening. The power of relationship starts taking over. Love starts moving in their midst. And they start realizing that their children need the same things. Their children aren't that different after all. And then something even crazier happens. They start not just understanding one another, they start admiring one another. And they become friends. They have a 10-day meeting. At the end of this 10-day meeting, C.P. Ellis stands up and rips up his Ku Klux Klan card. There's a documentary about this relationship. It's a true story. The documentary is titled An Unlikely Friendship. Now, I think that's the stupidest title for that documentary. This isn't an unlikely friendship. This is a miracle. This is crazy. No one would believe this, right? That somehow love can overcome the violent histories of these 2 people and the violent history of all that racism is in the United States. Somehow love can overcome that and bring something new and bring reconciliation and friendship and a new start. That's amazing. Maybe it's time that we start expecting that God can do something new in our time and in our lives too. Maybe it's time we start expecting that love can overcome violence, and love is stronger than violence. That somehow love can move in our midst, in the midst of enemies even, and help them understand one another and help us find reconciliation. That somehow love can pick up the shattered pieces of our lives, pick up a few of them at a time and put them together somehow, that we can find our footing and find some wholeness again. That love can make forgiveness and grace possible. Maybe it's time we start expecting this. Now, we might say that our time is different, the problems go too deep, or our lives aren't that exciting that something miraculous could happen in our midst, or the brokenness in our lives is just too deep, too intractable. God can't do anything with it. But the story says to that, but Christ isn't dead. Christ is alive. God is out there. Christ is on the loose, ready to encounter us where we need to encounter Christ in the midst of our brokenness. When Jesus was on the cross, everybody thought it was done. Pilate, Caiaphas, Peter, everybody. And somehow through the weight of all of that sin and through the weight of death, God did a new thing. And this is the message of Easter, that in the midst of our lives, in the midst of the brokenness and the sin and everything else, God can still hang with us and do a new thing too. And for this, we give thanks. Thanks be to God. Amen.